online conference titled Now Boarding College. For this talk, we have Simon Lee here today from Princeton Review Philippines to share some insight and advice for standardized testing in regards to college applications. Mr. Lee is the founder and director of the Princeton Review Philippines. He graduated from Duke University and INSEAD with an MBA. He taught and consulted thousands of students over the years, including many of the top undergraduate and graduate studies matriculators around the Philippines. He advises edtech startups around Asia. And lastly, he is a 99th% scorer on all of his standardized exams. The Princeton Review.
Oh,
sorry.
So
Go ahead.
No, sorry. I thought you were done. Sorry. So go ahead.
All right, sorry. The Princeton Review Philippines offers the highest quality test preparation, admissions consulting, and academic tutorials in Manila. Since its inception in 2015, the Princeton Review Philippines has helped guide thousands of students in the Philippines into basically every top 100 university in the world. TPR Philippines' instructors are very rigorously selected to deliver the highest quality of support for the services it provides, including 99th percentile scorers, master's degree holders, and PhDs among their teachers. With the formal backing of the Princeton Review's global infrastructure, the Princeton Review Philippines incorporates the highest quality of education technology related to study abroad support and test preparation. With that, I'll now like to let Simon Lee take the floor. Thank you.
All right. Oops. Sorry, let me. Okay, so I'm going to assume that everyone can see this. If anyone, if there's any issues, please someone to stop me. I gave a talk last week, I want to say. So there might be like a few slides that are repeating from that one, but today, we're going to focus more on standardized tests. This is just a little bit of my background. If anyone has any questions about anything specifically, feel free to ask later, because we'll do a short Q&A at the end. All right. So I mean, the roadmap to college, right? Everyone's journey is going to be personal, right? I intentionally zoomed into this to make it seem, especially crazy. But for anyone who has planned this thoroughly since middle school, or in some cases elementary school or something, you guys will probably know what I'm talking about, right? And seeing how many things there are to worry about, right? But so today we're just looking at test prep, which is a very important part of the picture, but it is in the end just one, right? It's one of several really important themes. Okay, so sorry, 1 second. Explaining the chat. So okay, as far as test prep goes, the nice thing is actually there aren't so many choices or tests that you need to consider, right? As far as going US if you do full IB, then you have you might have fewer reasons to take SAT, ACT, but if you're coming from a local school, SAT, ACT becomes that much more important. But as far as a requirement or a ticket into US universities, Canada, all around Europe, Asia, Australia, SAT and slightly lesser extent ACT is accepted everywhere, right? So and it's pretty much just these two. They used to have SAT subject tests. You don't have to worry about those anymore, right? IB, AP, that's a completely different thing. If you get to do those, then great. If not, it's okay, right? Not a huge deal. You would need to check individually if TOEFL or Ielts is required in your case, right? If you go to an international school, right, or an English-speaking school, or you have a good SAT score, you might not need to take it, right? So that's something that you'd want to verify case by case, okay? But if you want to be sure, if you want to just be sure that you did everything you could, that doesn't hurt to take a TOEFL or IELTS, right? TOEFL or IELTS, that's more of the English language speaking exam, right? Whereas SAT, ACT, right, this test's a little bit deeper than that, right? And of course, they have a math as well. A common question is the difference between SAT and ACT. And you can see in this graph, there's a lot of little differences. Having done this now for about 10 years, I honestly don't think it makes a big difference either way. If you prepare for either exam properly, or if you prepare properly, the score comes out basically the same, right? Based on the concordance charts, right? So what I do recommend is you do go through practice exams, in the off chance that you actually are more comfortable on one, like you prefer looking at one format, because if you do, right, you're going to be the one that's going to have to study for it for 100 hours plus or whatever it is. So it might as well be something that actually makes you happy to look at it every time. Yeah, but some big picture differences. I'm just going to handpick a few things from this chart. The ACT science is unique, right? The SAT reading has some science passages, but it's still not it's not so sciencey like the ACT science technically is, in focus of topics. The SAT math has a no calculator section, right? But with that, they don't expect you to do crazy computations. But it's just, I do see occasionally for students who are really dependent on their calculators, right? If you're the case where, like you lose a calculator and basic arithmetic or algebra, you start to get really nervous about, then maybe SAT is not for you, right? Maybe ACT is better. But again, for majority of cases, it's fine, right? The SAT math, no calc, they it'll be like basic fractions, basic numbers. It's not meant to be so crazy. Another difference, ACT in general, you have to hustle a lot more. Hustle meaning it's going to feel more like sprints. The reading and science, you have to go through really fast. Okay, but with that, the trade-off is that the questions, on average, they're not as dense, right? They don't go as deep in logic and thought. But SAT reading, even the writing and language, these are things that you definitely can't approach very superficially. Yeah, I heard a comment in our last talk, right, a week ago. Someone was asking, right, they heard that except for the reading, you can just kind of memorize a lot of things for the writing and language and math, right? And for the SAT side, especially, I was saying I would disagree with that. And if you're trying to get like a 1400, 1450, maybe, right? If you perfect like everything else, but if you want to get some of the deeper questions right, absolutely, you have to do some deep reading, right? You have to really understand. Yeah, otherwise, very, very similar, right? As I was saying, right? The writing and language on SAT is basically the ACT English section, right? And then the SAT reading kind of splits into the ACT reading and science, right? So it's very similar. Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, oh, sorry. Let me skip this slide. Yeah, as I was saying, if you want to know which one's right for you, just take a practice test. There's so many free ones out there. ACT website will have some. College Board will have some. Princeton Review site will have some, right? And actually, it's very easy to find a lot of material, a lot of free materials, right? So try it, right? Get your score report. We give free consultations if you want to have a chat with one of us, just to get a sense of like how long you need to study for it, what your options are, right? Feel free to reach out. And as far as like how long it takes to study for this test, there's several things that go into that formula, right? Of how long you should study. One of the important things is what score you need, right, for your school list, right? If you already know your grades and your activities and your overall profile, pretty much caps you at a certain ceiling, right? Your SAT score by itself is not going to make up for that, right? So if your other specs pretty much like you do feel like you're in a certain range of schools, then with that, your SAT ambitions also don't need to be like 1500, right? If you're aiming for schools in like the 1300 region, right, then your plan adjusts accordingly. Okay. Yeah, and it also depends on where you're at, right? So if you took a diagnostic and you're scoring like 800 or 900, and you are trying to get 1300, definitely possible, right? It's definitely doable. It's just likely to take more time, right? Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail, like how long you should study for these things. But yeah, this is more just know your schools, right? Know where you're applying to. Okay, something that's really important for you guys to consider is the SAT is changing. Actually, for international, it's changing already next year. So if you are a rising sophomore, rising freshman, sophomore, or below, then this will for sure, or is very likely to impact you. If you're a rising junior now, or a rising senior especially, then probably not. Then maybe you can actually get away with it, right? You can just take the current SAT. It's not, so again, with all these test prep changes, the SAT has changed already a few times in the past 15 years. But with all these, or past 20 years, but with all these test prep changes, it's still trying to do the same thing, right? It's trying to deliver the same curve. And this SAT, this new one especially, it doesn't change so much from the previous one. It changes in format and presentation. It's computerized, right? For one thing, but it's like I'll show some question types in a second. But it's not a huge difference from the current one. So if you're studying for the current one, a lot of those skills will translate to the new one. Okay, but keep in mind, what are they doing? They're making it shorter. It's becoming a lot less wordy, which is great. Right, the current SAT is definitely like unnecessarily wordy. It was intentional to how they wrote the exam or how they planned it. Each student is going to get unique questions, like unique question pool, right? So you and your friend are not going to get the same test, and it's adaptive, right? Which might sound scary, but that's why they're able to make it shorter, because of the adaptive aspect, right? Meaning, like, if you're a really good student, you're not going to be wasting time solving a lot of easy questions, because as you get questions correct, it's going to give you harder and harder questions. Okay, and this time calculator will be allowed on the whole thing. There's no calculator section. Okay, so actually going back to the ACT issue, the ACT is computerized right now in international, right? So if you take it in the Philippines, ACT is computerized, SAT is still paper-based. If that makes a big difference for you, then you have like these next 5 months to take advantage of the SAT being paper-based. Okay, but after that, it's all computerized. Okay. And these are just some examples of like the new SAT. They're releasing more and more materials about it. So the left one is an example of a reading writing question, right? Just short paragraphs. They can ask so many different things, like the purpose, vocab, tone, etc., structure, right? But here it's just like what logic completes this one, right? Math, it's the same style, right? If you look at the current SAT format, you're going to see a lot of similar questions. Okay. So yeah, in like preparing this presentation, one of the guiding questions that was raised by Camp was to talk about this test optional, test blind aspect. And it is a huge difference. So test blind means even if you send a score, they won't care, right? Like if you send a score, it will not help or hurt. It will not do anything. They will basically toss into the garbage. Test optional means if you send it, they will consider it. So it can help you if it's a good, if it adds relevant information about your app. If you don't want to send one, though, it's okay, right? They say that it will not affect your candidacy. Okay, but it is a strange concept, right? If you think about it, if other students are sending or can send in SAT scores that will make themselves look better, that does indirectly, it could make you look worse, right? And not sending one. So as I said in last presentation, as I'm going to probably say a few times today, if you can get a good score, you absolutely should take it. Okay, if you know yourself that like it's going to be a huge waste of time, or then fine, right? You cut your losses early, but you're absolutely better off having a good score, right? So that's the difference, right? Blind doesn't matter at all. Optional, they will look at it if you send it. Okay, now I think it's still more than 50% of schools that are optional and or blind, or optional or blind. But of those optional and blind ones, majority are optional. Okay, there aren't that many test blind schools, right? So Caltech is one, right? Very, very, it's a great school if you were to get in, but they don't. Not many even apply there. UC is very popular, right? They're very popular on the test blind. But other than that, you're going to see a lot of test optional schools. And of course, on the flip side, there are schools that are requiring it already. Okay, so this is where you need to look into your school list and think about where you want to go, or where you want to submit an app. Okay, and I showed this in the previous talk, but a lot of schools. So this whole test optional thing is nothing new. every school did this because of COVID. That's really why this all happened. There's no other reason. If anyone says otherwise, it's not true, right? COVID is what led all these schools to go optional. U Chicago, though, they were a rare school that did this before COVID, right? 2018, you see this announcement. It was optional, though not blind. But this was more for they didn't want to, what is it? They wanted to remove a roadblock for students who cannot afford SAT, ACT preparation, right? Or who cannot afford to take these exams, right? They cannot afford that path. So this was their way of really strongly signaling to the market, it's okay if you haven't submitted, or if you haven't been able to take one, we want you to apply anyway. Okay, but even as they said that right on their website today, right, you'll still see this, right? It's true, a majority of other students do submit. So of course, it looks better. So if you go to a nice private school, or you go to one of the top international or local schools in the Philippines, this whole like optional thing, based on this reason, it doesn't really apply to you, right? If you have the means to take it, it could look a little bit stranger that you didn't. Of course, like the official party line is that they will not punish you for not taking it, but it just could look strange, right? Like why didn't you when all of your peers were taking it? Okay. Yeah, and if you're not IB or not AP system, or you don't have a lot of like international standardized things to show, in general, you should almost think of it as a requirement. Like it would be really good for you to have an SAT to send. Okay, because like the more like remote or smaller your school is, the less the harder it is for these colleges to project out, right, your abilities and your potential, and right, so that's where SAT will help contextualize all that. Okay, and it's a very common theme, right? Princeton, same thing. They're test optional, not blind. Okay, but it's very helpful to predict. That is what SAT was originally designed to do, right? It was supposed to be predictive of how you're going to fare. I believe it's your first year of college. Yeah, so all these hypotheticals about, like, should you take the test or not, it does seem to be supported by data, right? Most students, or so like most, or I don't know most, but many schools, right, many good schools, these top brand name schools, they reported, right, that a lot of the students who got in, the acceptance rates were higher in general, right, for the ones who submitted tests. And like I said before, it's hard to say if there's a cause and effect thing, right? Did they get in because they took the tests, or is it that the students who had more impressive applications in general, right, were more likely to do things like the SAT, right? Maybe so it just came hand in hand with that. Hard to say, right? But the point, I think, remains that if you had to pick which side you want to be on, I think you would want to probably be the one with the test. Okay. So this is made by a private organization, so I wouldn't look at this as fact. And in fact, this is last year, so it's already been updated since. But there are schools that have shown a historical tendency to prefer these exams, right? So you see on the right side there, right, schools like Georgetown, Georgia Tech, right? Now it's required, right? This year they made it required, so you can see how it makes sense. I mean, it was really, the data was telling, right? The COVID data of them preferring it, showing the preference, admitting more who took the test. You see it follow through. Okay, so how early should you start preparing? This really depends on your school curriculum. It really depends on what content base you're starting with. For example, I wouldn't use SAT preparation to learn high school, all years of high school content that you may have not gotten to yet. So if you're in grade 9, do you want to start studying when you're going to learn a lot of stuff in grade 10 and 11? Maybe not, right? Maybe you can wait until you go through school first, and then you do the SAT prep to make it more efficient. Right. That said, let's say you've actually learned everything already that gets covered on SAT, right? SAT is not it doesn't reach the levels of IB or AP, right? It's not, there's no calculus on there. There's like barely any pre-calculus on there, right? That it's like the curriculum is not meant to be so hard. It's hard in its own ways, is in other ways. So if you've already been exposed to all this content, then starting early, not bad, right? You get more time to habitualize, or to familiarize rather. You have more time to, for some students, it does just take longer time for their memory and for, things to just sink in and become more natural, right? Because the SAT 3-hour exam is quite long, right? And with all that pressure, you're going to be resorting to a lot of habits, right? So these habits, like all habits, they take time to form, right? These instincts and decisions under pressure. So, so like once you maybe have gone through a good portion of the content, I think it's about time when you'd want to start thinking about preparing. So for a lot of like international school students, a lot of the like maybe private school, local schools like Xavier, ICA, Ateneo, all these kinds of schools. Usually, I would say grade 10, end of grade 10 is a good time to look into starting, right? So for the more advanced students, maybe sometime in grade 10 is okay. But starting grade 11 is not too late at all. You just have more things to do in grade 11, right? With grade 11 in general, but in some schools, IB and AP gets heavier those years. So that part is where it gets subjective, and it's up to you. Okay, so some students have some students exclusively study for this during their summer break, winter break, things like this, right? Some spend those summers and winters to travel and do other things, camps, etc., and then they study for it during the school year, right? And things like that will change the timeline, right? Because if you do 2 months in the summer, very concentrated, that can have a lot more impact than like 5 months of school, like 5 months of studying it while you have school and you're distracted, right? So yeah, you would think about that quality quantity balance as far as what like preparing means for you. Okay. How should you start preparing? So it really depends on your like, I guess your like philosophy about learning. So if you really want to self-study this whole thing, that's fine, right? It does happen. And there are a ton of free resources. Khan Academy is a very obvious one, right? For SAT, even just YouTubing, there are tons of free content. Like I was saying before, there's so many free practice tests and diagnostics that you can get around online, right? College Board has a lot of free SAT stuff. Khan, of course, has as well. Princeton Review will give you one. Kaplan will give you one. Many standardized tests. You can buy a book in the bookstore. That's quite, that's going to be affordable. The danger is just this, right? Just like learning anything on your own. If you learn a sport, you learn an instrument, can you self-teach all these things? Of course, right? But if you hit a wall with it, it's rare that, that a student who self-studies all the way through has really maximized their potential, right? I would hope that there is actually something that, like I, having done this for 10 plus years, can offer, right? Offer you that could help you, right? Beyond your experiences self-studying, right? So if ever you hit a wall, I do recommend at least then you maybe look into getting some help, right? And I think one thing I would like to clarify though, as far as like what I see a lot of students do that is not effective way to study, is like some students just practice. They just do a mock test, grade it, get a score. Maybe they'll look over their mistakes really quickly, right? Or just they'll figure out, they'll like learn like, oh, this was letter C for that reason, letter B for another reason, done, and then they're in such a rush to take their next mock test, and they just practice and take 10 practice tests, review it, and then they're like, okay, that's all I can do. Okay, and like pedagogically speaking, that's not a very good way to learn anything, right? So yeah, if that's your approach, just to drill, practice, this is not really that kind of exam, right? This is not like memorizing history facts and then practicing remembering it. Okay, if you're trying to get like a 1200, then maybe, right? Then actually, then I might agree that, but then I wouldn't do full mocks over and over again. I would maybe just do like math sets only, right? Math set, check it, review it. Math set, check it, review it. And then like split it up, right? don't do like reading, writing, and math in one 3-hour sitting and then do the whole thing again. I wouldn't do that. Okay. Yeah, and as far as like when should you start preparing, how long should you study, it really depends also on where you are on this curve, right? If you don't have much content or much background, the initial is just a lot of those kinds of things, right? A lot of like memorizing formulas, definitions, basic intuitions, just getting your bearings down, right? And again, this is true of almost like learning anything, right? If you want to like play piano, right, you got to learn like some basics first, right? Even if you want to play a sport, you got to learn some basics first. But once you figure these things out, then you have more of an opportunity to accelerate, right? And there is such a thing as at least short-term potential, or even medium-term potential. There is a plateau that if you guys have studied for SAT, you might already know what this means, right? What getting stuck on a score and it's hard to improve from there. For some students, it's a real plateau, and it's just limited by like a lifetime of habits, right? And just like their critical thinking ability and the curriculum and content they've been exposed to in school, right? So where that plateau is really it differs for every student, right? Some students will get capped at a high 1300 score. Some students will get capped in the 1550s level. It really depends. Okay. Yeah, so if things like this, if you're not sure, feel free to reach out to us. We do free chats, right? And we're I feel like I can often spot this, right? And I'll probably tell you, I'll tell you myself like where I think you're at, and what you can expect moving forward. Okay, so if you come to a center like us when you're relatively early stage, right, then you have like all your increase ahead of you, right? Like that's when we're thinking with 300, 400 point increases possible, right? Even more, right? Possible. If you're coming to us after having exhausted all the preparation that you can do, and you've read so many books and you've practiced like 20 practice tests, and you come to us, yeah, we can still probably get another 50, 100 points, right? But then that's where it really depends more. So ACT and SAT, they like to say that once you've cleaned up all the all the things you've forgotten, once you clean all that up, once you get to your your fair value at the time as far as your SAT score, it takes 9 months of school for you to improve. That's 2 points on the ACT, so it's like 60 points in the SAT. They're saying it takes 9 months of like going to school that's the equivalent of a 60-point improvement on SAT. Okay, so it's to show you how like from that plateau, how much effort, right, it takes to increase in that plateau area. Okay, and even then, right, every student has different needs as far as more content thing and more strategy thing, more of a mental cognitive maximization thing. There's many reasons why, right, students need support and help. Okay, so with that help theme, right? So I was saying before, whether it is for test prep, school tutorials, consulting, yeah, feel free to reach out to us. As far as the test prep, we have in one-on-one format, we have small group format, we have a group class format. Okay, so yeah, you have our information on here. Our office actually might reopen. So our office is, you can see, in Surendra. We are hoping to get it physically back open within a few weeks, actually. So if ever you really want to do face-to-face, we already are doing some face-to-face, but if you want to do face-to-face in our office, that will soon be available. Okay, so let me check out the questions. All right, I'm starting with the top one. For test optional schools, if you don't submit your SAT scores, will it hurt? So yeah, like I was saying earlier, it won't. They will say it doesn't hurt your app, right? The college admissions officers, that's their party line. But I was explaining that philosophically, it seems strange because, like, the ones who submit, it can help them, right? So you guys are fighting for limited seats. So if it helps your competitor, right, then that does indirectly hurt you, right? So I call this a philosophical thing. Like it's up to you how you want to see it. I think it indirectly hurts you, right? I think it does, but if your grades are perfect and you have like glowing recommendations, essays are great, you might not need the SAT. Okay, but that's also where it now depends on what school you go to as well. Right? If your school has a pretty good track record, good reputation, then maybe okay. If your school is not, then like historically doesn't send to the university you're hoping to go, then you even more so probably need the SAT. Okay. The second question, should I still take SAT even if it doesn't require it? So it's similar to the first one. Yeah, so I won't repeat the answer, but if you can get a good score, then you should do it. Should we submit our scores when it falls on the lower end of the average? That's a really good question. I mean, that's a tough one. Yeah, it's not a great situation to be in. I would say while you have time. I mean, you haven't applied yet, so while you have time, just try to get another 50, 100 points. And then yeah, worst case, we cross this bridge later on. But if you need to make this decision, I don't know. I mean, if your grades are bad, or if your grades are like not strong either, then you might as well submit it just to, the off chance that it suggests you're academically like still okay and within range, but not a good sign, right? But if your academics are very strong, and you think the SAT will shore up some like really specific weaknesses on your app, let's say it's like an English speaking ability thing, or I don't know, your math or something. Maybe you were a little bit insecure about the math on your transcript and your SAT math score is pretty good. Then maybe consider it. Consider sending a lower one. All right. If I'm applying to schools outside the US and some of them accept. Yeah, for sure. I mean, whether US or outside the US, if they look at SAT scores, you should definitely do it. Right. I mean, like I can't stress enough how competitive college admissions has gotten compared to even 2 years ago, right? And definitely compared to 5 years ago, right? And definitely compared to 15 years ago, right? So it's getting much more competitive. That like you shouldn't be trying to just cross the minimum line. Like the burden is on you to prove why you deserve to go to the school. And with that, you guys should be excited that there's even a chance to show this through SAT, right? That you have another way to differentiate. Price range, yeah. So that depends. I'd say we have students who engage with us anywhere between like 30,000 pesos total to heck, like the most. Let me think. What's the most a student has spent with us? Maybe more than $1 million. So it depends on what how long you engage us and how much you're trying to do, right? But if you want us to like take you from grade 9 to grade 12, right, help you with everything, it's going to be really expensive. But if it's just for SAT, like literally just SAT, and let's say you want to some brush up, or you want to really like maximize your time, right? Even like 10 hours of one-on-one, that can last like 3 months if you use it properly, right? Even 10 hours of one-on-one can go a really long way, right? To just like you just solve a lot, get all your questions in order, right? And then just really efficiently in 1 hour, just go through and get your feedback and your adjustments and your guidance, right? That can go a really long way. So yeah, that's, if ever you're not sure, just reach out to us. And then if you have any restrictions or budget, of course, just let us know, and then we'll pitch to you what we think is best. Which subject? I mean, if you have like, if you're like grade 10 or grade 9 and you have a lot of time, it doesn't matter so much. But I guess maybe the weakness first, if you have a long time. Like if you're taking the exam in like a month and your weakness is like a really big weakness, then it might be easier to improve your strength. Like that said, if you're going to send like 800 math and like a 450 verbal, like that's not going to look good, right? So like no matter the situation. So yeah, I guess like get your weakness at least to like maybe 600 level if you can, like at least a certain minimum. And then maybe focus on your strength. Yeah, so that depends more on the situation. But is it wise to send essay test scores to schools? If you send it to schools that are blind, they will not even look at it, so it doesn't matter. Oh, sorry, sorry, I misunderstood your question. You sending it blind. I don't think that's necessary because October SAT, your scores should come out safely before the early deadlines. And like November, December, you cannot send anyway, so it doesn't matter. So yeah, I get why you bring that up because that was a thing of the past. But SAT scores now they come out pretty fast, so I don't think you're gonna have to worry about this one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what schools exactly you have in mind. Maybe there's a few that have conflicting deadlines. But yeah, I still think you don't have to worry about this one this year. What scores competitive applicant? Oh, MIT Harvard. I want perfect, like 1550 plus. Yeah, I mean, like, can you get into Harvard with less? Of course, but the rest for app has to be really, really good. But I would say most students, what I see, right, applying to these schools, 1580, 1570 plus minus. How often should you take full practice tests? So yeah, it's if you're like if you've already like done the deep like topic-based studying for this exam, then maybe really all you need to do is practice, right? If you've really clarified all the individual content and your like all your like really focused doubts and such. But yeah, but I still like it's almost like I keep bringing like golf metaphors up. If any of you guys can relate, right? It's like if you're trying to learn how to play golf, it doesn't really make sense to just keep going out into the field and just like practicing on the course. Like, if you got to work on your swing or like certain aspects of your game, you should work on that. So like you should not use full practice tests as your main mode of studying, like just to get a score and just to see, like the score. Like that's not, it's your inputs that are going to lead your score higher, not just like taking it over and over again. It's like what you learn from each one that matters, right? So that's what I was just saying, taking a full test 3 hours straight, like mixed content, it's not the most pedagogically effective. Okay, but if it's like the end of your journey, then fine. Self-studying. Best approach for self-studying. So a lot of like whether it's Khan or Princeton Review, right? You can take free diagnostics and they'll give you some analysis themselves, right? Some like problem areas, weaknesses. I wouldn't take those so literally anyway, but if you wanted to start with that to guide you as to like what you're weaker in, then that can inform like what sets to do, right? What sets to focus on. Or right, if you have good sense, then just look over your mistakes yourself, right? And try to really understand and analyze how you could have avoided these mistakes, right? What you need to do, right? And then you can make your own study path and yeah, like best approach. I mean, so yeah, books online. Maybe the mistakes you make, like especially for math, you can rewrite the mistakes like in a notebook, just so you can review it in one go. Yeah, so it's like the deep understanding more than just practice. Should I take AP tests instead of SAT? If you can take AP, I think no matter what you should, right? Because it's just pushing yourself to do the best you can, and that's always going to be attractive to college. So if you have the option, yes, do it. And it's also college credit if you get a good score in it. Yeah, as far as instead of, that's depends on what schools exactly. If they don't need the SAT, then sure. But a lot of students will do the full IB plus SAT, right? They'll do full AP load with SAT. So yeah, if you're choosing between the two, that really depends on your school list. But I would say all else equal, I think AP, like if you have like 5 exams of AP with 5s on all of them, that is much more impressive than a 1500 plus SAT score. I think. Okay, I don't know, much more impressive, but it's more impressive to me, right? I mean, 5 AP exams, that's like 5 years of classes, right? And you know, getting a 5 on them all, it's like college level credit, right? So, yeah, if it's that, then fine. If it's like 1 AP exam, then I think SAT would probably be better, right? If you got a good score on that. Scholarships. So yeah, we do technically with like with certain schools. If you want to set up a scholarship thing with your school, I don't know what school you go to. But we do offer scholarships for students who are like, you know, what is it? They're scholars in their school. You know, like they've demonstrated to the school that they don't have like the means, right, to pay for even their school. So yeah, if you have a question about this, like I feel free to reach out. And in fact, yeah, like school partnerships, we're always open to do this stuff. So yeah, just let us know. What other things do? Yeah, so test prep. Yes, we help with essays. Essay consulting is our most expensive service, actually. So it's one of our more popular ones. And what is it? We also do academic tutorials, right? So if you need help with like your schoolwork, right, or you know your school classes for math, any of the sciences, English, whatever, right, business, economics, we do have tutors for that. A number up to 100%. Number up to how much SAT score helps. A good score, how much a good score helps? See, it's hard to throw out a number here. I don't know, 70%. And I'm saying that more just because I like the number 7, but it helps. But I don't even know how to put a number to this. Like the 70% mean that it increases your chance by 70%? Like definitely not, right? But it's important, right? It's not everything, but it's important. How do our students handle doing both? Yeah, that's good. I mean, you know, so this is what colleges also why they like SAT and good grades, because it shows that the students are, you know, very organized, good self-management, good discipline, you know, a lot of other good qualities, right? It's tough, right? It was not that long ago that I was a high school student. I remember it very well. It's a tough journey to go through, but with that, it's fair, right? If you want to go to a school that takes like, you know, the top 0.01% of students in the world, right? You need to demonstrate that you deserve to be there, right? And that you are a 0.001% student. You know, so how do they handle it? They I don't know, they care about it so much that they're, you know, they make the sacrifices. But yeah, it's tough, right? I guess I'm not sure how to answer this either, but they just I guess tutoring helps a lot for sure. Like even back when I was in high school, this is not even a plug for our business, but when I was in high school, well, good tutoring, right? For sure, I had a lot of bad tutors too, and there are a lot of bad tutors out there as well. But if you have a good tutor, it can definitely make your high school life a lot easier. Yeah, like there were some IBH subjects, for example, for me, I don't even remember really studying for it, because when I was doing tutor, we pretty much like learned everything ahead. So yeah. Should I still use sample questions? 2013, 2014 is way too old. That's like the previous SAT. So no. ACT, that's still technically okay. But there's a lot of stuff recent, so you might as well use the recent stuff. Yeah, best method. Yeah, I kind of answered this already earlier. It's, I guess I would want to hear some examples first of like what you mean by method. But I mean, like any, you know, like I brought up the golf metaphor earlier. It's funny because I'm a pretty terrible golfer, but it's fine. I never just, well, partially because I didn't have the time and I don't care enough, I guess. But I never got a coach for it. But you know, you see, I've been playing now for like 5-6 years and I'm really bad still. That it's like I think the best is to have a really good coach, you know, to who you get along with, and to fix your mistakes, right, and coach you along the way, because it'll just be so much more efficient, right? But yeah, if that's not your way though, yeah, I guess practice. You want to really understand your mistakes well. You gotta use flashcards maybe to memorize the things that you don't know well, right? Just keep like reinforcing that. Try to, yeah, it's like anything where you're just memorizing simplified advice, that's already not the way to study for this test, right? You have to find like the personalized approach that fits you, right? And that's why I was saying a coach helps, right? AP, SATs, test centers, just go on College Board. College Board will give you both, right? If you just type for both, because AP centers especially, that depends on which AP you're trying to do. For SAT, a lot of schools have it, but they fill up really fast. So if you're trying to take SAT, you sign up as soon as you can, right? It's like it was a nightmare the past few years. All the centers got full so quickly, right? That students studied for it for even like a good year, and then they were never able to take the exam even, right? Because all the centers just filled up. Yeah, the SAT Ielts requirement, that really depends on the school, but on the most part, if you do really well in the SAT, most schools, even if they say they require Ielts, they usually exempt it. So it's some schools, some universities are really strict about this kind of stuff, even if you have a good SAT score. So it depends on your list. Yeah, like sorry, I can't give a better answer to that, but it really depends on your list. So that's what I was saying earlier. If you want to be safe, then take it all. But by all meaning one of SAT, ACT, and one of IELTS or TOEFL. But if you go to English speaking school, you're doing full IB, and then you're doing SAT and you do it well, you're probably okay with IELTS. Probably. All right. Okay, great.
Yep, I think that is all the questions. Again, you all have the information on the screen. I do agree with your golf metaphor thing, that you really do need a coach, because I also play golf and
right.
improve myself a lot. So yes, guys, if you're interested in availing the services of Princeton, everything is on the screen, as you can see. Thank you so much again, Simon, for delivering this talk about the SAT, the SATs, the different tests and the updates to the SAT, which I think not much people actually know about. So that was very insightful. And to everyone here, we do have the college fair later at 7 p.m. So we have NYU Shanghai first, and then we also have the University of Waterloo, Nagoya University, University of Calgary, and California College of the Arts. So if you're interested in that, please go to our college fair later. And again, thank you so much for everyone for joining this talk, and thank you again, Simon. See you.
Great, thank you. See you guys.